You're listening to the Josh Parnell Leadership Podcast. We all have leadership within us, and once we understand how to challenge perceived limitations, we're able to influence those we're leading. Josh is a leadership coach, trainer, and speaker. He's also a veteran of the United States Air Force with over 20 years of leadership experience. Are you ready to transform your leadership skills by tapping into unrecognized potential to achieve limitless results? Let's get ready for liftoff. It's time to go from great to greater. Here's Josh in today's episode.
Welcome to the Josh Parnell Leadership Podcast. Once again, folks, I am so glad that you're here. We got another fantastic guest on this episode. So our guest today is the founder of RK Leadership Coaching and Training, and also the COO of EME Utility Engineering. Our guest today, I actually met our guest on Facebook about a handful of months ago, and he and I have been connecting off and on for a while, just learning from each other, growing from each other. He's a fellow leadership coach, and I could not be more excited to have Rob Kamranpoor on the podcast. Rob, thanks for joining us, man.
Good afternoon, Josh, and thank you so much for having me here, and I'm excited to have this conversation with you today.
Of course, we're excited too. I cannot wait for the audience to get to know you more. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right into it. Who is Rob Kamranpoor?
Awesome. All right. So I'll give you, I'll backpedal a bit and give you a little bit of my story and how I became, to be. So my parents left a country back during the Iran-Iraq War back in the 80s. We came to Canada in 1987. And, I watched my parents go through a lot of hardship. Landing here, we lived in a motel for 6 months. It was very hard for us to even, get a rental property or like an apartment, to find an apartment back in those days, as you had to pretty much give the superintendents jewelry and things like that just to get on the waiting list. So I watched my parents go through a lot of struggle in life, and in school, being an immigrant, bullying was definitely there. So I was bullied for not being able to speak the language, not having friends at the time. So it was a rough upbringing, to say the least. And we lived in somewhat of a rough neighborhood as well, the community at least. Fast forward, my parents always wanted me to become an engineer, and I struggled during my teenage years because I was doing everything else but studying. So got involved with the wrong crowd, was out and about most of the time, partying and doing all the other stuff rather than studying. So when I got into university, my GPA was 0.27 originally. So I came to the crossroad, and one of my professors told me that you'll never be an engineer, because I was trying to get a few marks there, and she wouldn't give it to me. And she made that comment, which was really hurtful, but it lit a fire underneath me. So after that year, I was on probation. It was either me getting my act together or getting a job at McDonald's. So I decided to hit the books and turn my GPA to almost 4.0 the next year, and transferred to another university where I started my engineering. And the rest is kind of history. I got into the after I graduated, I got into working for a consulting company, did a gig at a railway company, had my own business for a little bit with a partner. So I love the entrepreneurship world. That was one of my passions. I learned a lot. I learned, partnerships are very difficult with your friends, and got into a utility company, and I was there for 13 years. In various roles. Again, had a lot of issues in terms of I wanted to get into leadership role, and it was very difficult in terms of not knowing and aligning yourself with the right people. I cannot tell you how many times, Josh, I applied for jobs and heard the word no. Got rejected so many times in life, failed so many times in life, but I never quit. And I got a coach back then, and I never forget, this word stuck with me, and it's one of my favorite words. He said, Rob, one thing you have is grit. He goes, never forget that. So that's what, it kind of really motivated me to keep going. Regardless of how many no's you hear, you got to keep going forward. I've, failed in relationships, failed at work, failed in interviews, but I never stayed down. So did that for 13 years, came out, worked for a smaller company. It was a company that was around for 40 years. Their revenue was about 5 million tops. And the first week I got in there, I looked at the owner and I said, I'm going to take your company to $50 million.
Wow.
And she laughed in my face really hard. So 6 months later, we hit 50 million.
6 months later?
Months later, we had 50 million, and I smiled at her. And so at the end of that year, we hit 70 million. But again, things went sideways. I left there, went to a consulting company for a little bit. And after that, I was done. I said, I had enough of the 9 to 5. And I came out. I started the leadership journey as I was posting, content earlier that year just to share my experience and, my knowledge with people. And I got reached out by a whole bunch of people saying, why don't you do coaching? So my first client was actually my landlord. So I coached her for about 6 months and seeing the progression that she made, and I loved it. It felt good because it was very fulfilling. So I took on some pro bono cases and clients to say, and again, I love having that feeling when people change for the better into something positive. So I've been doing that, and then just started the engineering company because for me, I wanna do leadership on a bigger scale. The one-on-ones weren't enough for me, so I want to reach out to more people. I want to have a bigger impact, and again, this is why I'm using social media to reach out and build that community. And you and I have had this conversation: is how do we collaborate to develop more leaders in the communities and in globally, right? So that's my mission. And I figured out my purpose a few years ago, Josh, when I totally broke down. I went through a divorce. My dad died and COVID happened all at the same time. And it really, I hit rock bottom. If anybody knows what rock bottom is, that was my rock bottom. And not being able to see my daughter, being stuck at home and not being able to see anybody, it just made me determined to want to do something bigger. So I kind of knew what my purpose was, but when I broke down that day, I wrote pages of what my purpose was. It just came to me, and it's to help people. I want to help people, and I know that's what fulfills me deep inside, and that's why this coaching has been. Honestly, I feel like every time I'm with a client, I feel like this, outside experience, out of body experience of this energy that I get to help people out. It might sound weird, but it's hard to explain to certain people, but I'm sure you get it. And I think that's what I was put on this earth to do, because going through, the teenage times, I don't know how I survived, Josh. I did a lot of bad stuff where got in trouble and did some stupid stuff, and I got out of it alive. So that's why I think there was a bigger purpose for me to be here, and this is to help out. So that's kind of my story in a nutshell. And again, I greatly appreciate you having me to share this with everybody.
Well, Rob, thank you for sharing your story with us. And man, I can hear your heart in what you're doing and why you're doing it now. Knowing your background and where you came from and things that you had to go through, I can understand why grit is a word that is, rings very powerful in your life. I have a handful of follow-up questions I'm going to go back to based on what you shared with us, but I want to kick things off today by asking just a very basic question. Of course, this is a leadership podcast.
Yes.
I'm going to ask you, Rob, what does leadership mean to you?
Great question. So leadership for me, Josh, is utilizing your humility and humanity and vision to lead people into a new destination, and also developing new leaders, not only in the office, but at home and in communities as well.
Love that. So, and I really appreciate how you just shared how leadership doesn't just apply at work. And I think for a lot of listeners, what we might be hearing is this is a leadership podcast, so naturally this is going to apply in a professional sense. But the reality is a lot of leadership principles can and do apply at home as well. We know the importance of communication, and we know the importance of engagement and even delegation, avoiding micromanagement. And for those of us who are living with people, all of these things apply at home as well. We talk about how important culture is in the workplace. There's a culture in your home as well. So let's talk about the two words that stood out to me when you talked about what leadership means to you was humility and humanity. Can you go a little bit deeper and talk about why those two words, what it is about humility and humanity that are so powerful for you?
Sure. So again, throughout my career and being in those leadership roles, I got a chance to talk to a lot of people, Josh, not only from my team, but there would be a lot of people from other teams that would come and kind of like have a heart-to-heart with me because of the way that their managers were treating them, the way they were, their mental health being impacted. People will come and break down in my office. And I think the humility and humanity for me is, my philosophy is lead with love and kindness. And when I deployed that without even me knowing it, because again, you have to be authentic in leadership, or else people will read it all over you, right? If you try to be somebody who you're not, it'll come out really fast. So that's who I've always been, regardless of where I was. And like you said, leadership applies everywhere. And to me, I try to apply that everywhere in my life. So it was easy to connect with people. My one-on-ones with people wasn't just about work. There was a lot of issues that people have. People have, including all of us, have problems outside of work. How do we have empathy? How are we helping them out to say, hey, you know what, I got you. Like, whatever, however I can help you, I'll help you. And if it means sometimes you having to go outside of the boundaries of the work, and I've done this before, you need to do that to help people out. And for me, I had no issues with talking to people, helping people, giving people your time, being present.
Yes, so good. Being present, showing up. I believe that empathizing with someone means that we don't necessarily have to experience the same situation as that person, but what it does mean is that we can imagine their circumstances and accept their feelings without validating them. And I think the key word here is invalidating. And I think for a lot of folks, they don't feel validated at work and at home. And so being able to show up for them and being able to really be present in their life can go a long way in validation. Let me ask you this. You talked about one-on-ones. Can you talk to the importance of one-on-ones in the workplace and also what they look like and don't look like?
Sure. So again, one-on-ones, learning in organizations, having these one-on-ones, you start off when you're a new leader, they give you this structure and these, typical questions and say, okay, do these, and it becomes a ticky box. I found that doesn't work, right? And it becomes very impersonal because you're asking things that it's like being automated. And I don't like being a robot. Again, you have to look at yourself being authentic. I would change the questions up. I would include my own questions to find out the importance of these one-on-ones is not only you talking. It's giving the opportunity for your team to also, ask you questions, participate in those conversations. And the biggest thing for me was development. Everybody wants to develop, grow. Not everybody, but I would say the majority of people want to develop, grow. How are you helping them? What's the plan? And it's not just talking. As a leader, you gotta walk the talk.
Yeah.
You say you're gonna do something and it's fantastic. You write on this piece of paper, you throw it in a file, and next year you talk about it again. Nothing happens.
Right.
For me, if you create a development plan, you need to have action items. You need to execute. I did a lot of project management in my days. So for me, I look at a lot of things from a project perspective. And if you see in my office, one of the things I got behind my head is a painting that depicts the word execution.
Mm.
For me, execution is everything. You can write all the strategies, these beautiful fancy papers. If you don't execute it, they're just beautiful papers with fancy words.
I think, Rob, for a lot of folks, one-on-ones, it is a type of a meeting. And when we hear that M word, the meeting, we get a lot of eyes start glazing over, eyes are rolling, and it's like, oh, here we go. We're talking about a meeting again. We got meetings about the meeting, and a lot of meetings could have been email, and there's this death by meeting approach, but there's a negative connotation when we hear the word meeting for a reason. And it's to your point, it's what you're sharing, how we go to a meeting and talk about a lot of things, and there's initiatives that are discussed. We talk about agendas, we talk about goals, but what happens beyond that meeting? For a lot of meetings, there's a lot of talk and there's no walk. There's the execution part is truly missing. And so I really appreciate how you're talking about when we have a one-on-one with someone, it is not necessarily for us, it is truly for them. We know that their voice is going to be heard, their opinions are going to matter, their ideas are going to be considered. And beyond the one-to-one, you're giving them a call to action. We might both have calls to action, and then we're going to hold each other accountable in the process. So now not only are we talking the talk, but we can also walk the walk. And that really, man, I couldn't agree with you more. I do agree with you that the majority of people want to be developed. They want to be poured into. I saw a stat months ago where I think, I'm probably going to butcher these numbers to some degree, but maybe 70% of employees in the workplace right now are millennials, and 86% of millennials want to be poured into. They want to be invested in. They want to be developed. And your leadership influence can help develop team members. But what are we doing to actually impact them through our influence? I think one-on-ones is a great opportunity. So let's hang on this same vein of engagement, Rob. Let's talk about what it really looks like to engage with our team members. I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you to share, let's say, three tips that you might be able to give to the audience on how we can effectively engage team members in a positive way.
Sure. I think one there's a lot more than three I can come up with, but the one important thing is delegate work and challenge them to get out of the comfort zone. In order for people to grow, you have to, challenge them, because you see something in somebody that they don't see in themselves. Mm-hmm. And you as a leader, it's your job to bring that out. And when you create that environment where people can thrive and grow, that creates engagement, right? It also builds the most important thing, which is called trust, right? You're trusting them to do the work. And, we can talk about new leaders and how they like to hoard stuff and never delegate because they don't trust their team as well as they trust themselves, right? So that would be one thing. The other thing is creating a safe environment. And when I say safe, it's mentally, emotionally, and physically. And to dig a little deeper in that is, again, to build those relationships where anybody can come in your office or just come up to you and say, hey, Josh, I got an issue I need to talk to you about. Openly, transparently. Being able to say, to know that you're there to have their back and you're not gonna throw them under the bus or judge them. People don't like to be judged, right? So building that trust again going back to the trust. So that's number two.
Hey, can I stop you for a second?
Yeah.
want to ask you because, earlier you mentioned how you personally went through a lot of things in your life that some might deem as failures or losses, but you didn't let that keep you down. And something I really appreciate and admire about you is that I always see the consistency in what you're doing and how you're doing it. You talked earlier about the post that you make on a regular basis, and I see it. It's good content. It's good quality content, and you're consistent. And the thing about successful people are successful. Those people who are successful, they just didn't quit. Like they just kept on going. Consistency is the name of the game. And so when you talk about creating a safe environment, what I hear you saying is a safe environment means that sometimes our team members, they may make mistakes. They may quote unquote fail at something, but that when we fail at something, that doesn't make us a failure. If we lose, it doesn't make us a loser. So those actions do not form our identity. Leaders can create a safe place by saying, look, here, failure is an option. Because if we're not failing, we're not learning. And if we're not learning, we're not growing. And if we're going to grow through anything, we've got to be willing to go through anything. So I, as a leader, am going to say, hey, look, failure, it actually is an option here. Yeah. We can win. And if we fail, we're still winning because we're learning in the process. Is that safe to say?
You only learn from failure, Josh. Love it. So, I can give you an example of that. And I had an employee, and again, going back a little bit more, it's also coaching your team, to stay, and you're always accountable. I've always put up my hand. If whatever that goes sideways, I'm the one that's raising. I'm accountable for my team.
Yeah, that's good.
So I'm always putting up my hand. So I'll give you an example. I had an employee. I was working as a field manager with unionized employees, and it was in a very, it was a very difficult environment where safety was high priority. I had an employee who had 3 incidences within a week and a bit. My manager's first thing was reprimand. I said no. And this individual had a little bit of a past, whatever. For me, I like to find root causes. I don't assume, I don't judge. So again, going back to creating that safe environment, remember, these guys are hardcore union folks where they hate management, by the way. But I using that humility and humanity to build that relationship with them, I got this individual in my office and I said, look, I'm not your manager right now. What happened? This can go 2 ways. You can either, we can go sideways and what I have to do. There's policies and procedures in place, or you can be open and honest with me and I can try to help you. And Josh, I kid you not, this hardcore grown man broke down in my office. And what I heard that he was dealing with, I'm like, no wonder. Mm-hmm. The focus isn't there. And that exact moment I said, take your stuff, go home, and you're going to go seek help right away. And you're not coming back to work until you're fixed, and I'm going to take care of the rest. Josh, this guy would call me every week and just thank me. Mm. And to me, that felt so good because God knows the next time, if you reprimand him, he comes back, you're not fixing anything, and this individual can kill themselves.
Yeah, that's right.
With a bigger incident, right? So I think we rush too fast into reprimanding people, and that's what I mean by creating that safe environment.
I think when you're able to create the connection, the content can come second.
Yes.
But for a lot of us, the mistake that we make is we're so focused on the content, meaning like, I'm going to tell you how to do your job. This is what you need to be doing. I'm giving you directive after directive, but I'm not really providing clarity and direction through questions and through getting to know someone and focusing on the connection and then the content. At the end of the day, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And that young man was able to recognize, hey, like, titles aside, work stuff aside, Rob is truly and authentically and genuinely asking me about me, about me, the person, not me, the employee, not me, the whatever title he had. And I think, man, that goes such a long way, because all of a sudden you recognize, hey, I do have a voice. My opinions do matter. My ideas are going to be considered. This person genuinely cares about me. And man, a safe environment, unfortunately, as you know, Rob, I'm not saying anything you don't already know, but as you know, a lot of folks do not feel safe at work. And that's really troubling.
It is. It absolutely is. And again, that's my mission, and missions like people like yourself to enable and empower new leaders to create those safe environments, so the next generation or the current generation doesn't have to go through all these mental health issues.
Yeah.
And that's another topic by itself. And the third thing, Josh, I can say is that inclusivity. For me, a lot of the decisions I would make, I'd like to bring my team and certain people to say, hey, what's your opinion on this?
Yes.
And that inclusivity, when they feel like they're a part of something and they're part of this vision and mission, that's when you create that engagement. And when you're transparent with them, you say, this is what I'm trying to do. This is the goal, or this is, we have this problem. How do we solve it together? You're not always there to, you're not the person that's supposed to solve everything.
Right. That's right.
That's why you have a team. Your subject matter experts you hire those subject matter experts for a reason. So why are you making the decisions when you've got all these subject matter experts underneath you?
And Rob, I don't want to glaze over this. I think this is very important for listeners. I think a lot of folks feel like, as a leader, I need to have all the answers. I'm supposed to know all the things. And I'm just a big believer in the fact that as a leader, we can kind of have our pulse on a lot of things, but we're not necessarily in charge of anything. We're delegating and empowering and trusting our team members to champion these particular processes or procedures. And we're creating that safe environment, and we're inclusive in a sense of everyone is a part of the mission. Everyone is a part of, like, the vision was cast. So now we're going to be a part of the mission together to drive towards that vision. Even in my corporate job that I had, I left about a year ago, but my corporate job, every single interview would include the entire team in the interview. It's important that the prospective hire sees, hey, this team, they're inclusive, they are empowering each other. If I'm potentially going to get hired on this team, I know I'm going to have a voice. I'm going to have an opinion. My ideas are going to be considered. And everyone, if we couldn't have one person a part of the interview, then we wouldn't have the interview. The entire team was a part of the interview process, because the prospective hires, they're going to be working with this individual more than me anyway, most likely.
That's amazing, Josh. I hadn't heard that before. Like, I would include like my supervisors and in those interviews, but having the whole team, that's a great approach, because like you said, they're going to be working together more than you are going to be working.
Right. Yeah.
It just makes sense that collaboratively they say, yes, we can work with this individual, or no, we can't. You're mitigating a lot of risk up front.
We are. And what we learned also is once the entire team was a part of all the interview processes, the person who eventually was hired, they walked into a team where they already knew everyone, because they knew everyone at the interview. And so it was, very early on, we were able to build that connection and build that rapport, because we weren't having to introduce a new hire to the existing team.
Amazing. That's great. And just going back to the point you brought up, Josh, about not having to know everything. There's two ways to look at this. And this is what the people at the top need to decide. Do you want a leader or you want a manager? Leader leads people, a manager manages the work. Right?
That's right. Yep.
That's what you got to decide. And it's very simple. And as a leader, sure, you can do both, but not all managers are leaders.
I love that. And I think it's important to know, like, what you're sharing is really more confirmation for the listeners that leadership is truly a full-time job.
Yes.
And I think that we see a lot of folks who are doing really well in the jobs that they do. They've mastered these processes, and it's gotten them a promotion to a formal leadership role. But the mistake that a lot of folks fall into is when the promotion occurs, they're now leading people, but they're still doing a lot of the same responsibilities they were as player. They're the coach, but they're doing the same responsibilities. And so there's got to be a more definitive line where, look, you're truly going from a player to a coach. You're going from a manager of processes to a leader of people here. So, man, I really can't thank you enough, Rob. I think this discussion has been amazing. I really appreciate the 3 steps that you gave: delegation, creating a safe environment, inclusivity. And to your point, there's so many more points you can share, more tips you can share about engagement. But if we can just adopt those 3 tips, I would imagine that we would see team member retention increase, the morale increase, the culture become better. So I again, can't thank you enough for being here, Rob. Love what you're doing. I think you're a fantastic leadership coach. So even though I'm a leadership coach, I'm telling my listeners, hey, I may not be your cup of tea, but I know Rob might be. So, man, Rob, if you would share with the audience how they can get in touch with you, where can they get to know more about Rob Kamranpoor?
Sure. I think I'm pretty much everywhere now. But I think, the platforms I try to focus more on is LinkedIn. You can find me under Rob Kamranpoor or RK Leadership. I'm more I'm more engaged in the Rob Kamranpoor because I had that one for a while. Facebook, RK Leadership. I've got a YouTube channel at RK Leadership Podcast where you'll find a lot of free content that I put out there, again, just to help those new leaders, anybody wanting to get into leadership and understanding. I talk a lot about mindset as well. For me, mindset is super important. Always remember that leadership starts with you. If you can't lead yourself, you can't lead people. Okay. And in order for you to lead yourself, you got to create the right mindset, discipline, and that self-awareness.
And I'll be a testament to your content, Rob. I can't speak highly enough about it, man. You're doing a fantastic job. And I'm learning from you as well. I mean, the beauty of what we do is we get to learn and grow together. And so can't thank you enough for being on the show today. Thank you for joining us. Hopefully this isn't your last time on the Josh Parnell Leadership Podcast.
No, absolutely. Hopefully not.
Well, thank you everyone for tuning in to the Josh Parnell Leadership Podcast. Have a great day. Don't forget to smile today. Tell your loved ones how much they mean to you. I'm Josh Parnell, reminding you to keep leading well.